You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
Before we get started, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters.
All the things that you won't do.
Did you know 81% of Americans would like to become a published author? Chances are you might be one of them. What's stopping you? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work and is expensive, right? Well, not anymore. For your next book project, or even your first, team up with Hassle-Free Books. They make it so easy to become an author. They remove all of the fuss and struggle and make it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to hasslefreebooks.com and use promo code UNPAUSE to receive a 10% discount off of any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. For your free 1-hour book formula guide, which will show you just how painless it can be to become an author, head to hasslefreebooks.com today.
All right. Thanks again for joining me. Let's get started with today's show.
Took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of life.
This is Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes of the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. My next guest is Dr. Venus Nicolino, otherwise known as Dr. V. And she's a renowned relationship expert, media personality, and host of WeTV's Marriage Bootcamp. Take a compassionate and empathetic understanding of life's problems, add a dash of profanity, and you get Dr. V. She's edgy, humorous, and has a philosophical take on how to human. She's an audience favorite. Now entering her 4th season of Marriage Bootcamp, reality stars Dr. V first appeared on Bravo's LA Shrinks in 2013. Since then, she's been featured on Real Housewives of New Jersey, Millionaire Matchmaker, and appeared as a recurring guest on Watch What Happens Live, the Dr. Oz Show, the Real and Rachael Ray. Welcome, Dr. V.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. So before I begin, I just want to ask you, what are the rules of the show?
There are no fucking rules on my podcast.
Okay, fuck yeah, man. Let me tell you, because I can't. Let me tell you, I probably do a radio or a podcast interview per week, and I'll never forget. I was actually in studio, and one of the producers put up a big sign after I said the F word. It was like, no cursing. So I always like to ask what the rules are. So I'm glad, we can drop the occasional F-bomb because that's what we do, right?
I love it. I just got interviewed for NBC for the psychology behind cussing because I'm very sailor-like, and it's so therapeutic for me when I drop the F word. I'm like, I just feel good.
Oh, the psychology of the F-bomb. I mean, there is some softer science behind people who use the F-bomb. Now, I always say I've never used the F-bomb toward someone, so I'm not throwing it at people. But what I often do, and I think coming from Yo Philly, is I use it as an explanation point for myself. How do you use it?
Usually, something goes wrong and I'm like, oh, fuck. Or, are you kidding? Fuck that. It's very expressive. I use it as an explanation
point.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of the time. And a lot of people aren't offended because they're used to me talking like that. So once in a while.
Me too.
Yeah, it's once in a while I get that one person who's like, oh, Oh my God, did you just say that? Like, what did I say?
Fucking did.
Yeah.
I fucking did. We can't be friends. But I'll tell you, as I've gotten a little bit older, I've scaled it back just a little bit. I'm conscientious of who might be offended by that. And I just kind of place it in my head. We just can't be friends. That's all. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like, we can't get that close.
No, I completely understand
If
that.
you can't accept all of me, right? If you can't accept all of me, if you can't fucking accept all of me, then, you know, we just can't get that close.
It's interesting in my line of work because I do generally addiction. So there's usually a lot of cussing somewhere along the line. In your line of work, when you're working with a patient, how many times do you have to get their attention by using some form of an explicitive?
That's a really great question. Like, how do you emphasize certain sentences? Is that what you're asking?
Well, in addiction, it's kind of common. So if I have a client who comes to session and they're supposed to do something and they didn't do it, and they come back and they have all these excuses, I might say, okay, enough with the fucking excuses. Or I'm not going to co-sign your bullshit. I mean, these are context of terms that we use pretty regularly in addiction coaching and addiction therapy because that's what gets them to go, uh-oh, this is serious.
Well, then maybe I'm in the wrong line of work. Maybe I need to get into addiction specialist. Because I think that's just my regular conversation. But you know what? The English language doesn't have an informal way of speaking. So a lot of Latin languages or romantic languages, they have a formal and an informal way of speaking. We don't have that. So when we use expletives, when we use the F-bomb, in my mind, all I'm doing is using an informal use of language. And a lot of times with clients or with patients, everybody relaxes because they realize you're being informal, right? In a formal kind of setting.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting how it's different in psychology. The populations are different. So tell us what it's like working in the relationship side of things. Do you work with couples? Do you work with singles? Tell me what you're doing.
Well, my main focus, my research focus, I started out in conflict, what it means to have conflict, and on a much larger scale. Where else on the micro level do we find conflict? We find conflict in our relationships. So that is how I started out in the relationship field, applying research skills that I learned and that information that I love and applying it to relationships. What I often find in the relationship space is that people are bringing conflict. They're bringing conflict to the relationship or they're bringing conflict within themselves.
Okay. So on Marriage Boot Camp, which couple did you see conflict with?
The season that is coming up, and I believe it's March 9th, I'm terrible with the dates, is probably the most conflict I have ever seen. Not only within the relationship, but within themselves. So you have the couple as a whole, and then you have the individual, right?
Right.
And not only is the couple going on the journey through the show and through the actual process, but they are going on their own individual journey. So I get to see that as well. And I would have to say the most conflict that I have seen on the show after doing it for 6 seasons is the one that's about to air for sure. I think also when Javi and Kale were on the show, Kale and Javi were in such conflict. And I think what struck me the most about that conflict was that it was 2 people, like being in a room with 2 people who are both dying of a broken heart was profound for me as a professional. When you just feel that radiating off of each person and the relationship. And they both were mourning, a hoped for future. They both were mourning that. And within that was a lot of anger, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that stands out in my mind as a lot of conflict
Have you ever looked at a couple and just shook your head and said, why are the two of you together? This just isn't going to work?
Every day. I do that every day, but I'll tell you, within the Cal and hobby relationship, that was a very profound experience for me. And the thing I like about marriage boot camp is that it's an actual process that we take the couples through. And they're not expecting to be doing this process. I don't think there's anything that they can do to prepare for it. But I like the fact that I'm on a show where there's a really great takeaway. I can't tell you how many times, I'm stopped on the street or in general. If I learned so much from that show, I was able to communicate effectively. I was able to argue effectively. So that feels good. In our line of work, we want to make sure that if we are in the media, we're doing something that's meaningful and purposeful. And I'm sure you feel the same way, which is why you're doing this podcast, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I like being able to give back in different ways and interact. And it's like planting a seed. You could work with somebody and not see a change. And then 6 months later, they go, aha, now I know what she's talking about. And all of a sudden they implement the change.
Well, I always say insight doesn't lead to change. Change leads to change. So people come in and they collect your insights. And then when they decide to change, it's through that insight, but it doesn't lead to that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you never know when the person's going to grow. You have no idea.
Yeah, you're right. And then sometimes you get a call 2 years later and they say, oh my God, I finally got what you said. I got the meaning behind what you said a year ago. And you're going, what did I say? I forgot what I said by now.
Well, what fascinates me about the field of psychology and doing what we do, it's never our fancy interpretations. It's never our incredible, lofty insights that we think we have. It's solely the relationship that cures, that heals. It is the relationship. It's how we helped them feel in those moments. And maybe it wasn't always easy and it was a struggle, or even perhaps a relationship can be at times very combative. It's the relationship. So as I've gotten more comfortable in my chair after 25 years of doing this work, I realize that more and more and more, that it's about the relationship. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm sure you probably feel the same way, that it is the relationship.
Well, it's interesting. I want to go to a point you said earlier. You said there's a relationship within yourself, and then there's the relationship you have with other people. What happens when the internal conflict is so great that somebody has the same combative relationship? Let's say they pick Becky and they're with Becky for 2 years and they break up and they call Becky psycho because she has all these issues. And then they start dating Susan. And Susan seems to have the same issues Becky does. And they date the same person with a different name, never realize, hey, maybe I'm the problem.
It's romantic dysfunction at its finest. It's the same situation with a different person. And the through line in all of that is that person who's continually picking the Beckys of the world. Like there's one through line, and that is that person who's continually picking wrong people. And I don't know if your background is more of a psychoanalytic background, repeating patterns and that kind of thing. I think as the year 2018, we've kind of moved a little bit away from that. I mean, it's really about just pointing out the pattern that you're consistently picking the wrong person. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate. Like, does it feel like you're always trusting or loving the wrong person? I always believe that there's an ignoring of your instincts. And a lot of things can throw off human instinct. And mainly what I have found is trauma. Trauma throws off our instincts. So if you've been traumatized in the past, your instincts get thrown off. You bring that with you. So it's not just repeating the same relationship, but the relationship with yourself is about ignoring your instincts, because I believe there was a point when there were red flags. I always say to people, don't go around collecting red flags. Don't ignore the first one. It's there. But our brain picks up countless tiny clues and observations about someone, and then it delivers a conclusion about that information at light speed. It's called thin slicing. And like, if you ever thought to yourself, I like this person, or no, shit, what a creep. And within moments of meeting that person, you will get that information. But here's the catch. The more time you spend with a person, the more data your brain has to analyze. And if you don't like what you're starting to pick up on, you may start to talk yourself out of what you already know to be true. And that is ignoring your instincts. So I always tell people, trust your instincts. They're real. They're there. First impressions are important, but so are all the other ones. So the person who finds themselves in the relationship with the wrong person time after time after time again, okay, you're the through line in that. You are the constant. What is it about you that is choosing the wrong person? And I bet you somewhere along the line, it's ignoring your instincts. You know that person. Like there was a red flag that you ignored.
That's so interesting, because I sat down one day and I took this course in my PhD program where you had to analyze yourself. Thought this will be fun. So they asked us.
Really?
Yeah.
That would not be fun. I would be like, no.
It was eye-opening.
I love it.
So the professor.
What did you find out?
Well, this is what he said. List all of the boyfriends you've had or girlfriends you've had, or mix of both or whatever. So I did that. And then you had to list what they look like, what their traits were, what their job was, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had to find the one commonality, because he said every single one of these people will have one common thing. Because they could be blonde, they could be brunette, they could be short, they could be fat, they could be an engineer or a housekeeper. Didn't matter. And I went through and I went, holy shit. Every one of them was a cocaine addict. And I just sat there and I'm like, I got a thing for the bad boys. Like beyond that, like the addicted bad boys. So it was so interesting for me. And now when I have clients, I make them do that exercise for insight on what they do and their patterns of behavior and why you like that individual.
Mm-hmm. So what happened when you found out that the commonality, which is screaming you in the face, is that they're all cocaine addicts? Like, what did you change? Was it an aha moment? What did you do with that information? Did you stay away from cocaine addicts? Were you more aware?
I was already married. He's a cocaine addict. So I said to myself, what within me is the problem? What am I fulfilling with these guys? What's the thing? Mm-hmm. So I started internally assessing my process. And I started looking at things from a different perspective. And then, of course, I said to my husband, I'm like, we have to write a book. And he goes, why? And I'm like, because this is really interesting stuff. And we have a book coming out. So it took me.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. It took me seeing myself outside myself to make changes within myself, if that makes sense.
But is it outside of yourself? I mean, you are who you love, not who loves you. Love is a co-occurring process. It's something that we create together. And that has been scientifically and biologically proven. On the flip side of that, we don't really know how. So it's this unique process that, I mean, it's like magic. It's like magic. So we want to think of it as a very straightforward process, that it's one way. But it is not. You're creating something together. And what I love is that what you did was created something with your husband together. You created a book because you intuitively knew that. You already know that. You see what I'm saying? Like you almost already know that how you feel about him isn't just how you feel. Love is co-occurring, right? Now, what's the flip side of that, which is a saying that I cannot stand, is this idea that you can't love anyone until you love yourself. Well, what a bunch of bullshit. Because I can't tell you how many people I love with tremendous amounts of self-hatred. I truly love them. And you're loving people biologically and scientifically all day long. And guess what? Yourself doesn't give a fuck about how you feel about you. Because love is co-occurring. We create it together. So we have this idea of like, oh, you can't love anyone until you love yourself. And it's almost like we're branding this nonsense. Love yourself, love yourself. It's in every song. It's all over. It's on signs. It's on billboards, on Sunset. Love yourself. But for fuck's sake, no one tells you how. Because it's scientifically and biologically impossible to love yourself the way you would love someone else. And what fascinates me is that we're such a society that is fixated on the emergencies, right? We're fixated on the emergency exit. I mean, how many times on an airplane are they going to tell you to fasten your seatbelt, right? We are fixated on emergencies. And yet, we don't teach people how to care for themselves. I'm going to throw out the word love yourself, but how to really care for yourself, particularly in times of an emergency. And I'm sure as an addiction specialist, you probably deal with this a lot, that, people's maladaptive coping skills are drugs. And more than that, not to simplify such a complicated process, but this idea about love and what love means, not only loving someone else as this solitary process, but the ability to love yourself the way you would love someone else. So society really fucks us up in that area. I just got really philosophical. Bring me back.
Well, I'll bring you back with some humor. So my husband and I got into an argument, a conflict, as you would say, the other day. And I said, you married an Italian woman. And he goes, you can't choose who you love. And I said, you're right. So you have to expect the anger and you have to expect me to throw things at you because that's what we do. And he goes, can we change the behavior? And I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of a moral compass. So we got into this debate over conflict.
Well, from one Italian woman to another, is that really conflict? I mean, isn't that just what we do? Isn't that love?
That's what I said.
I thought that was love.
I tried that. I'm like, but I love you. He goes, I love you too, but I hate you. I'm like, well, yeah, I know. I said, Italian women will shoot you and bring you ravioli in the hospital. I mean, that's just who we are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what nationality is your husband?
Oh God, Irish, and I think he's Irish German. His family's from Kentucky and Tennessee, but he was raised in Florida. So he's very Southern.
Okay. So he's secretly sexually aroused by your passion. I'm just going to take a guess. He'll never admit it, but you start throwing shit and he gets a boner. I mean, come on. You're just lovable that way. I find that mixture of couple where you bring the fire and you bring the passion and the other side is more of a calm, more of a calming force or doesn't really know what to do with that. It's an exciting union, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's never dull. It's never dull.
It is never dull. You are right. And he giggles when I get mad, which makes me even madder. I'm like, stop giggling. He's like, you're so cute when you're mad. And I'm 5'2". So
I
put his hand on my head.
I'm telling you.
This is not cute. He's like, you're adorable.
See, I was right.
You
He's
are
like
right.
Sexually turned on.
Uh-huh. And then it makes me madder. And I'm like, stop it. You're not taking me seriously. And he's like, how do I take you seriously? You're adorable when you're angry. And I'm like, oh, please.
Aw, that's sweet. Do you use it as a time to come together? Do you have a lot of makeup sex?
Of course. Sometimes I think he pisses me off just to have sex because it's like he'll do something. I'm like, why did you do that? And I'll start to get angry and he'll start giggling. And I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm not going to reward your behavior. And then he'll say, come on.
So that's an incredible piece of information for you, that he fetishizes conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. I'm fascinated by people who are turned on by conflict.
Well,
I mean, I don't mean to be analyzing your husband without his permission.
Oh, he doesn't care. I analyze him all day long. It's so interesting because I do this for a living that sometimes I don't even realize what's happening in my, immediate surroundings. And it's like someone will say something and I'll say, yeah, that's what's going on. Like, how did you not see that? Well, I wasn't, I'm in it, so I don't see it all the time. Does that ever happen to you?
Well, I think it's the nature. You know what? I have a feeling I'm a lot older than you.
Probably
I'll be
not.
46. I'll be 46 in March.
I'll be 44 in July. So happy birthday.
Oh, okay. So happy birthday to you. So we're in the same generation. For some reason, I thought I was much older than you, but I've been feeling old lately, so that's why. As I've gotten older, I feel like I'm able to get more of a bird's eye view of myself in situations. I'm able to extend that observing ego longer than I could as a younger person. And that if I remain calm and I'm not my Italian nonna, I'm not throwing the pots and I'm not yelling. Like if I'm able to remain calm, and by the way, I've gotten much better with that through meditation, I'm able to really hover above the situation for much longer in ways that I wasn't able to. But that being said, with you and your husband, a lot of times, again, it's the fire, it's the passion that makes the marriage work. It makes it flow. How long have you been married? I've been with my husband for 20 years. How long have you been married?
We've been married 8, together 10, and we both say the same thing. No one else would put up with us.
So you recognize your own kind, right?
We do. And it's such a unique, and I didn't know this would be about me, but it's such a unique experience. We're complete opposite. We are complete opposite, yet somehow it works.
I hear that a lot, that people are exact opposite. And I wonder what I see in these relationships where they're polar opposites of one another is that the capacity to love is very similar. That your capacity to love each other is as wide as the Pacific Ocean. You could have all the similarities in the world, but if your capacity to love is as big as the Atlantic or the Pacific, and his capacity to love is a shot glass, no matter how much you have in common, that relationship's going to fail. So what I find in relationships is the ones that work is that the couple is able to swim in the same depth of their emotional ocean together.
Oh, that's very interesting. And that explains a lot.
So, yeah, with you and your husband, I bet your capacity to love one another while you're polar opposites is very, very, very similar. And I'm sure, you probably had relationships in the past where your capacity to love was like an ocean and theirs was, you couldn't even fill up a shot glass with what their capacity to love. And that's when you see enormous amounts of turmoil and maybe even abuse. But what you're describing to me is this polar opposite, and yet at the same time, there's this fundamental sameness that is probably the most important piece in a relationship. And you're very lucky. You're very lucky to have that. I think as Valentine's Day approaches, what I see more and more in my office is because of this false marker of time and this bullshit holiday, people feel overwhelmed that they don't have someone in their life. And they're struggling with that. Or they find themselves on these dating apps. Or more importantly, they don't really know how to date. They don't really know how to have a relationship. And I think one of the biggest things I have to say is stop texting. Just stop. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Having your relationships, big conversations through text is like trying to fly a helicopter to the moon. You just can't do it. It's not built for that kind of work. So much of what we're doing is over our phone. that I find myself. And what's interesting is that it's so obvious after I say it. Well, did you think about calling her? Oh, no, I didn't. We were just texting. So you had this whole argument over the phone, but it never occurred to you to just pick up the phone. So I find that we're getting so lost in our phones that the obvious solutions are not so obvious.
That's true. We've become a digital society where it's easier to text and less personal. If I text you, I don't have to identify any pain, any suffering, or listen to pain and suffering. I can just be completely absent and devoid of emotion through text. And then also there's the misreading of what's there. If I misread your text and get irritated, now we're having an argument because I misread your text, which could have completely been avoided in the first place.
Right. It causes so many problems that it's beyond what is comprehensible for me, to be honest. Just pick up the phone, stop texting, just pick up the phone. And there are times when I'm finding myself almost pushing clients to take that step. What is so scary about picking up the phone? Which leads me to another interesting point that I have seen a lot of, that in our modern dating, in our modern sort of relationships, particularly in the beginning of a relationship, there's this idea that the person who cares less wins. And I'm fascinated by this, because where else would you apply this concept? Would you apply this in your work? Oh, I'm going to care less about that. I'm going to win. Or would you apply this in your family? Oh, I'm going to care less about my mom. I'll win. So to apply this in a relationship, this idea of if I care less, I'll win, fascinates me, because let me tell you, the person who cares less gets less, period. And so we're accustomed to this idea, this idea about caring less and being more aloof and being unavailable. And I find myself, again, pushing clients or gently nudging them to take a risk. Take a risk and care more. What's the worst that will happen? The person you like will find out you like them? Gasp! Oh, that would be terrible. So within our phones, we're unable to actually navigate relationships even when they're in front of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What would you tell our listeners if, Valentine's Day is coming up, they're single, they're looking for someone, or they're just unhappy? What's some advice you could give them?
Well, Valentine's Day is bullshit. So let's just start from there, that baseline, that, society, we're pushed to feel things by society. I mean, Christmas is a very depressing time for people because they think they should be happy. And very much like Valentine's Day, you're pushed to feel that you should be with someone. Should. And fuck the shoulds. If you're alone, take that day and that time to honor yourself and to take really good care of you, and know that you are lovable and that special someone is out there for you. It's just a matter of time, and it's a numbers game for sure. And if you are alone and you want to change that, there are definitely ways to go about doing that, by taking more risks, by going out in public, by meeting other people and putting yourself out there, putting the word out that to your friends that, hey, I'm single and I'm looking for someone. I'm looking to have a relationship now. I'm ready. And if you're not ready for that, that's okay too. There's something to be said about being by yourself. And I don't think as a society we value that the way we should. That being alone and being by yourself can bring about enormous changes and growth and education and knowledge within yourself. Now, biologically, anthropologically, as well as scientifically, we are pushed to coupling. We're pushed to community, and that's a very good thing. But if you find yourself alone, my advice to you would be to accept that, to accept where you are in your life. Because that is self-care, real self-care, acceptance.
That's awesome. So that's fantastic. That's great advice. How can our listeners find you?
You know, this is always a really big brain teaser for me. I'm supposed to remember a whole bunch of stupid fucking letters and ads. So I'm going to do the best I can.
All that's going to be up next to you on the podcast. So if you just have general direction, that's fine.
I think I am Dr.V_tweet. So Dr. V tweet on Twitter. Now on Instagram, I think I am at Doctor spelled out _V_. I was on another radio station. She was like, "There's a lot of underscores." And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't know how that happened." So I apologize to our listeners if you don't know where your underscore button is. I don't know where it is either. I did at that moment, but I don't know now.
Awesome. Well, we will put all that up, and I want to thank you for coming on the show and enlightening us and having a good time.
Well, thanks for having me. We had such a good time, and it was a lot of fun. And I wish you the best of luck. Say hello to your husband. Let him know we talked about him. We're fascinated by him. And I look forward to meeting you in person one day. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this is Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be weak, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do.